Okay, shall I try?
Episode 1, take 14. Mark. And action. Action. Thanks.
Wait, what?
Take 24. Mark. Take 107. Mark.
Hi guys, I'm Vix, and I love books, I love YouTube, so it's time to get excited about books on YouTube. I'm here today to talk to you about a couple of books I've read in the past few weeks that I've really enjoyed, and hopefully you might go ahead and enjoy them too. To go along with our bookish talk, I have a cocktail of my own creation, which I have chosen right this second to call the Tinkerbell. I will leave the recipe down in the doobly-doo so that you can enjoy it too if you read any of these books, or even if you don't. Let's start with The Vegetarian, which is the book that I finished most recently. It's a novella in 3 acts. It tells the story of Young-hae, who's a young woman in South Korea, who suddenly wakes up one morning after having a monstrous dream, deciding that she is going to entirely stop eating meat, which is definitely not conventional in South Korean culture. The novel is never told from her point of view. The first part is told from her husband's point of view, the second part from her brother-in-law, and the third part from her sister. It tells of the slow degrading of Young-hae's body and of her mind, assumingly as a result of her choice to become a vegetarian. It's a very strange book, but one of the best that I've read in a very long time. It has this sort of stillness to it, which doesn't make any sense when you think about it, because every character in this book is going through a very extreme set of emotions, a very violent life, both emotionally and physically. All of the trigger warnings apply to this book, by the way. There's a lot of sex with varying levels of consent. There's a lot of violence, psychological and physical. But don't let that put you off, because it's also a book rife with symbolism, full of colour, full of poetry, I would say, and that is definitely down to Han Kang, but also down to the masterful translation of Deborah Smith, who had only been learning Korean and Korean literature for 6 years when she translated this novel. She says that she mastered her knowledge of the Korean language through the translation of this book. I know that Jen Campbell recently did an interview with her, so you should go and check out Jen Campbell's channel if you'd like to see that. I'll link Jen's channel down below. It's a great video. I'm very into books that push convention, and I think Han Kang does this really, really well. You could say, I guess, that the book is about someone's decline into mental illness, but even saying that feels like I'm belittling it somewhat, and that it's so much more than that. So I think that you should just pick it up and see what you get from it yourself, and then we can talk about it. What struck me the most about this book is, first of all, how quickly I read it. I haven't read a book in a day for a very long time, but this one was really one that I couldn't put down. The language is absolutely glorious. You don't realise that you're reading a translation, which is quite something. And I think it's a book that will stay with me for a very, very long time. I'm reluctant to tell you anything because everyone I've spoken to, at least online, has a completely different view of this book and pulls different symbolism from the book. But all I can tell you is that it's about much more than just vegetarianism, at least in the traditional sense of the word. It speaks about womanhood, it speaks about a reclaiming of the female body, as well as complete violation, as I said, physical and psychological. And I would urge everyone to read it and everyone to join in this conversation. I think it was based on a short story that was also written by Han Kang, and it was published in Korea in 2007, but only just been published here. So hopefully that means that even more of Han Kang's work will be translated into English soon. I know her book Human Acts is definitely on my TBR. So there you go. That's The Vegetarian. Next, we're going to be talking about a book called Nothing, which leads to some very confusing conversations. I'm reading Nothing. And it's by a Danish author called Jan Teller. And I absolutely would not have happened upon this book were it not for my grandfather, who's very involved with the Royal Danish Society in London. This author did a signing at the Royal Danish Society a few months ago, I think in March, and actually dedicated this book to me, to Vix, because everything matters and words have weight. Good luck, Jan Teller. And I love me a dedicated book. And I had no idea who she was or what this book was about. All I knew was that it was a young adult novel which had been banned in various countries, including Scandinavian countries like Norway. It was actually published 15 years ago. She was asked to write a novel for young people by the Danish Minister for Education, and it's just been published in English. It tells the story of a young boy who wakes up one day and decides that nothing matters. He takes it upon himself to make his home in a tree and tell all his classmates that nothing in life matters. Now, a lot of the people who go to school with him, who are about 12, 13 years old, are incredibly scared and disturbed by this notion, because when does life matter more than when you're 12 and 13 years old? And so they take it upon themselves to create meaning from life and find meaning and find the things that matter to them and prove them wrong, so that he can get out from his tree and find his own life again. I guess today is sponsored by allegorical books, and this is definitely an allegory, which seems like a really small story, but I think it concerns some questions that are very important both for young people and adults, which are: what does matter in life? Is apathy worth it? What does it mean to be apathetic, whether that's caused by depression, whether that's caused by a period in life, or just general outlook, and what that means, and where us humans find meaning, and whether there's any meaning in that. What are the things that matter and don't matter, and are they sometimes the same? I learned after reading the book that the author was in fact depressed and on antidepressants when she wrote it. And that was really important to me to find out after I read the book, because one of the things that I found so special about this book is that it gives weight and acknowledgement to that feeling that all of us who have been depressed, gone through depression at some point in our lives, know well and probably fear. That feeling where food has no taste, nothing matters, pleasure is non-existent, complete anhedonia. And that feeling is often shied away from in day-to-day discourse. People are scared of acknowledging that feeling, and it's always up to you to find pleasure again, to find that hunger again. And I think it's important to sit with the fact that that apathy exists, and that sometimes that apathy is okay. And I think this is exactly what that author does. Obviously, it's hard to judge a writing style in a translation, I guess a little bit like The Vegetarian that I just reviewed. But the writing style is very simple. One would assume that this is written for about the 12 to 14 year old age group, but that doesn't mean that it's an easy read. It's a very difficult read, but it's certainly one that I would want my child to read, and I think it benefits from that simple writing style just because it allows you to, as I say, sit with those concepts that make you uncomfortable, and sit with the fact that there isn't actually intrinsic meaning in everything, and that that's okay. I think we live in a world which kind of obsesses about finding meaning in everything. All those Instagram posts with those live your life quotes, you know, you're supposed to have meaning for which cocktail you make or which brand of hot chocolate you drink or where you go on holiday, and sometimes you just do things because it makes you feel good and doesn't matter any more than that. And so I think this book taught me a lot of things, age 23, and I think it would definitely teach a young teen or tween those things too. I enjoyed the really cute little ironic joke I shared with the author at the end when I closed the book and immediately asked myself, well, what does this mean? I don't know if she was doing that on purpose, but it made me smile, and so if she was, then she got me. Cocktail break! Next we're gonna be talking about Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which has done the rounds on the internet, as well as everywhere, pretty much, newspapers, booktube, everywhere. And that's because, I'll tell you this right now, it is an absolute masterpiece. So I hold my hands up to Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, that she's getting all these great reviews, because she certainly deserves them. You might have heard of her if you've not read this book. She did a great TED talk called We Should All Be Feminists, as well as a little publication of that TED talk. And she's also written a couple of other novels, one of which is Half of a Yellow Sun, which is also on my TBR. This was the first of her novels that I read, but it's the first novel that she published in about 10 years, and you can tell that she's put a huge amount of work into it. It spans probably about 10 to 15 years, and we begin by following these two teenagers, about 15, 16, called Efemelu and Obinze, who both live in Nigeria. They both have dreams to move away from Nigeria and make their lives elsewhere. Obinze would love to move to America. Efemelu would also love to move to America, and they have dreams of joining each other there. The book follows both characters as their lives diverge. Efemelu gets to study in the United States, and Obinze eventually ends up in England as an undocumented immigrant. We follow Efemelu through a lot of life changes when she moves to America. Some good, some bad. It's definitely not the America that she dreamed of. She learns about the difference between being black in Nigeria and being black in America, and what that means for her own sense of racial identity and how that means that other people perceive her. She begins a blog in America about race, and so I guess it's kind of meta in that way, in that it very directly meditates about race, and you kind of get the sense that that's probably slightly autobiographical on Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's part, and having read a few interviews of her, I can definitely see that would be the case. This is, I think, in 2016, the current year, a very important book. And I think that's because it discusses, with a great deal of grace and poise, while being very hard-hitting, the themes of immigration, of emigration, of new countries, new cultures, new practices, new mores that are difficult to get into, and difficult to acclimatize to. What stood out to me about this book is quite how well the author builds her characters, to where when you finish, you really feel like you have lived with these characters, that they are three-dimensional, realistic, multifaceted, everything you would want from a character. It is quite a long book. I think my edition stands in at 477 pages. It's a tiny font too. We do have a lot of time and space to understand these characters and grow with them, and I think the temporal span of this book really helps to do that. I think the best way to attack the big questions of race, of belonging, of personhood, of immigration is to build personalities around them, and enable your reader to really identify with those struggles. It really feels like our two characters are out there living somewhere where we could probably talk to them on the phone if we wanted to. Their voices are so singular, so distinct, and it really is a masterful character study, I would say. One of the things too, especially about the heroine, who's a Femelu, is that she's really, really spunky, and I love myself a spunky heroine. She's loving, she's funny, she's sarcastic, she's highly intelligent. America is deserving of her. I would urge you not only to read this book, but also as accompanying reading material. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie did an interview as part of Lunch with the FT, which, although I don't really read the FT because I have no idea about most of what it's talking about, there is a great section, Lunch with the FT, that I love, which is basically an interviewer who goes and interviews all manner of people in the public eye, authors, economists, actors, a whole bunch of people, and has lunch with them and asks them a bunch of questions. And he went to Nigeria and had lunch with her, and I don't even want to tell you because I think that you should just experience the amazingness of the interview. But let's just say that I'm not surprised at all that she is most famous for a TED Talk called We Should All Be Feminists, because she is unapologetically woman, unapologetically loud woman, and she's really funny and lets the white male know that he is not the center of every discussion ever. And so I will link that down in the description below, and just go and click on it. Trust me, you won't regret it. Next, I'm going to be talking about a book that I don't actually have on me because I listened to it as an audiobook, and that is The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. This would be the book that resulted from the union of a self-help book and a memoir. If they had a child and that child inherited only the good parts of both parents, then you would end up with this book. I hate self-help books and I'm not a huge fan of memoirs, but I absolutely love this book and have been raving about it to everyone I come across, even if they have no idea who Amanda Palmer is. I'm not usually an audiobook listener. I prefer to have the physical book in my hands. Same reason why I haven't made the jump to Kindle Life yet. Hashtag Kindle Life. But I listened to a sample because I had a free credit on Audible, and she read her own audiobook, and just the sample made me A, fall in love with her voice, and B, fall in love with the way she was reading it, because who better to read a memoir than the person who wrote it? She does a fantastic job. She reads it with emotion, with humour, with musical talent, because you get to listen to a bunch of Dresden Doll songs whilst you're listening, which is every bit the interactive experience that I would want from an audiobook when I do choose to listen to one. So I highly recommend the audiobook if you do have any interest in picking this one up. The book tells of her transition into life as an artist, with, I guess, at its core, her beginnings when she decides that one day she's gonna say, "F it all," you can beep it out, I don't care, "F it all," to a normal job. She doesn't want to do a 9 to 5, she wants to be creative, she knows that much, and she also knows that she needs to earn money. So she decides that she is going to be a living statue in the middle of Boston and dresses up as an 8-foot bride and meets a bunch of people in the process and goes through a bunch of experiences. It tells also of the formation of the band, of the continuation of the band, of being dropped by her label, of her marriage to Neil Gaiman, as a person who said that she would never get married, never have children. I think the most important thing about this book is that it reminds you that you needn't feel bad for asking for help around you. And in fact, the only way that you can make your life happen in the way that you want to make your life happen is to surround yourself as much as you can with other people, to build on your own story using other people's stories, to lift other people's voices up with yours. And I think what she does a really great job of, and I'm not sure if this is just because I listened to the audiobook, but I hear that other people felt this too, is that even though she spent, whatever it is, 17 hours telling you her story, by the end, you feel like you've shared some of yourself too, and that you've become more confident in your story and the continuation of your story, and how you're not going to be scared to ask for help. You're not going to be scared to ask for confirmation that what you're doing is an important thing. And I've never really read a book like it. It really made me want to go out and do what I'm doing, be a creative, be the person I want to be. And that's pretty amazing given that all she did was tell me about her life. She talks a lot about the creation of something that has lived in your heart for a long time and that you want to bring out into the real world, and the fear associated with that, and the embarrassment associated with that, and the risk of failure and what that means, and actual failure and what that means. Don't be too worried if you don't know who Amanda Palmer is. I didn't really, apart from reading her blog occasionally and being aware of the Dresden Dolls. She's a performer, she's a musician, she's a feminist, she's an activist, and maybe least interestingly, she's Neil Gaiman's wife, and that should tell you something because that's pretty damn interesting. She will tell you her story. You don't really need to read up on it first, and she will just envelop you in a complete hug from page 1 to the end. This book will give you the great feeling that you get after the best of conversations with the best of people. So thanks, Amanda Palmer. Also, this is totally almost irrelevant, but just in case you didn't think that Neil Gaiman was the coolest person in the history of the world, this book will affirm that for you, because Neil Gaiman is the coolest person in the history of the world, and their love story is like something out of Shakespeare, except they don't both commit suicide at the end. This is my first video ever. Actually, no, that's a lie. I have like 4 or 5 videos buried deep in the depths of YouTube that I would prefer no one saw. But it's not porn, I promise. But please be gentle. Let me know what you enjoyed, what you didn't enjoy. I promise that I will be reviewing some books that I didn't like, but I've been really lucky this month, I guess, and recently in what I've read. So these reviews were really good. But expect more of this, some fun vlogs in bookstores and stuff. The next video I'm going to make, because why not be controversial when you have just started YouTube, is about Harry Potter and the Cursed Child and the playbook and the play itself. So expect that in the near future if I don't have a nervous breakdown while editing this video. I'll see you all again really, really soon for another cocktail and some more books.